Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. This generation or the younger generation coming through has got it harder.
This is The Payoff with me, Sylvia Jeffries. Chris Kohler, welcome finally to the show. So good to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We've been really excited to get you in because you have such a knack, I think, for breaking down really complex financial, economic issues in a way that's really accessible for people everywhere, not just in Australia, but globally now, thanks to your enormous social media following. But is this something that's always come naturally to you? Is it something that you've really consciously decided to focus on?
Yeah, it was certainly the latter. I was really scared, actually, of doing things that were a bit sillier on social media, and those first couple of times I put a video out of me basically being silly and pretending to be multiple people, or dancing around to the tune of Pump Up the Jam while pretending I'm a central banker. I felt so vulnerable for those first few weeks putting them out there because, you know, when you're a serious journalist with your tie on and your microphone in hand, you want to be taken so seriously, and the idea of deliberately making fun of the situation and yourself was certainly scary, but it's been good. It's been working. It's been feeling like I've been able to connect with an audience in a way that I didn't before. So it's been really nice.
Well, more than connect with them. You've got, 600,000 Instagram followers now and like a gazillion on TikTok or something. So what does that say to you about the fact that, yes, you were reluctant to kind of go down this silly path? I just think it's an entertaining path, really. But that you're getting such a strong reaction back from that.
I think it says that you can be yourself, and it's okay to be yourself. And as long as you're being authentic and you kind of, talking about stuff that you know or you kind of have a little bit of experience in, then you can try new things. And that's the greatest thing about social media, I reckon, is that you can fail and fail fast and then learn from it and then keep on trying different things until a format sticks or you get some feedback that feels good or sounds good. I mean, I was doing social media videos way back, 10, 12, 15 years ago that were much more serious journo format, and they were doing okay, but the real breakthrough was kind of deciding that you can muck around a bit.
Well, the first time we worked together was when I was working on a show for Nine that was only being broadcast on Facebook. It was quite experimental. It was sort of leaning into this new social media age. And I remember how enthusiastic you were to contribute to the show that we were doing. And first of all, I was grateful for that because it was a big help to have someone of your knowledge contributing to the show. But secondly, I really admired how keen you were to embrace new media in that way.
Oh, I was just keen to get on Sylvia Jeffries' show. Yeah. It was bloody great. No, I was excited.
There were plenty of slots available.
Well, that's the thing about social. I mean, it's all of a sudden it went from being the poor cousin of a newsroom to being very front and center. So I kind of feel like what you were doing there was sort of, was busting through a bit, and kind of making it into, this is where the eyeballs are, guys. Let's have a bit of a go at this. So no, I remember that really fondly. I remember we were talking about the kind of, even then, generational wealth disparities, avocado scandal, that whole thing. Yeah, the topics were eerily similar, weren't they?
They
to
were.
The stuff that's going on now.
They keep coming around, don't they?
They do.
So of all the videos that you've posted so far, especially these TikTok clips, these sort of skits, which one has taken off more than the rest?
Yeah, it's actually a good question. So the stuff about competition has done really well, that there's not enough competition, that we've only got 2 supermarkets and a handful of, banks. Those sorts of videos seem to do well. The one that went berserk was when I talked about, the customer is always right, maybe being not the full quote, customers being right. In matters of taste is the full quote that I had heard, which has been disputed. I'm not sure there's any real consensus on the original quote there, but it painted this picture of service workers, particularly hospitality and retail workers, shouldn't have to put up with bad behaviour from customers under this umbrella of the customer's always right. And that seemed to really strike a chord. People were sharing it around. It kind of frustrated me a bit because it wasn't as in-depth or serious of a topic. It was kind of just a bit of a factoid. But, it works off what people share to each other, and it went nuts. It's got 24 million views or something like that.
Well, as a long-time Alan Kohler fan, my mum was a very loyal ABC viewer, Channel 9, 6 p.m. viewer, 7 p.m. ABC viewer when I was growing up. Your dad, of course. How hard was it to convince him to get on board with these skits? Because he's appeared in a couple now.
He has. Look, he's pretty good. He's up for it. He's been tweeting since back in the day, so he's kind of on board with social media. I don't think he was that keen to play multiple characters and like switch his ties and glasses. But he's been in a couple, and we always really like it. Like we go to the footy together a lot, and we talk at halftime about this stuff. So a lot of the time, I'll just be like, "Hey, do you want to do a video about that?" Yeah. And I'm kind of like, "Yeah, okay. Oh, come around this weekend and we'll do it." It's really nice. It's a way for us to kind of keep on talking about
Connecting.
it all.
He has a very dry sense of humour, your dad, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
So is there space to explore some more of this with him? Can you push his comedic talents a little bit more, do you think?
I think so. I mean, I don't think he needs that much pushing. He loves telling jokes. He actually says to me that he thinks that finance news and business news is sometimes seen to be a bit of a chore for people, and so he likes to thank the audience by giving them a reason to smile. So whether it's a dad joke or even a pun, he's quite happy to do that. And so, yeah, I think he likes being a bit funny.
Well, would you say that's rubbed off on you?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, he's certainly been supportive. Like, to what we were saying before, I mean, the idea of sort of breaking ranks and doing skits, he's always been on board with it. He kind of quite often will say to me, "Hey, I love that one you did on insurance. That was funny," or whatever. Yeah. So that's really nice.
So growing up with one of the country's most prominent finance journalists, editors in the country, what were some of the earliest money lessons that your dad taught you when you were growing up?
Yeah, he never sort of sat me and my sisters down and said, "This is what you got to do with money," but it was kind of more of a set of expectations that we wouldn't spend our money on silly things if we came into it. And he was also really keen on us all having a job from a very young age. I got my first job before I turned 15 at the local IGA. It was definitely him and my mum who were just like, "All right, off you go. I'm going to help you write your resume. I want you to drop it off at every retailer, every hospitality place, cafe that will even have a conversation with you. I'm not going to help you, but off you go." And so I'd march up and down High Street and just drop them all in. Eventually got the job at the IGA, worked there for a while. I was terrible, but they were really nice to me. Then went from there to flipping burgers. When I finished school, I was working in bars and bottle shops. Like, it's just always been this idea that you will make your own money. You can live with us and all that. Yeah. But you got to make a little bit of money and learn what that's about.
So when I was 14, 9 months, I went straight to McDonald's at Cooperoo in Brisbane and
Nice.
got my first job. And I see that job still playing out in my life today, clean as you go. So if I'm cooking dinner, I will clean up everything as I go. I don't waste a minute so that there's not this big disaster of a mess at the end of the night. Yeah. The customer is allegedly always right, according to McDonald's, things like that. Yeah. So what kind of lessons did you learn from that first job at the IGA?
Yeah, what you're saying really, really rings true there. If you got time to lean, you got time to clean.
Yep. Time to lean.
Yeah, I mean, just basically look around, see if anything needs doing. We're out there collecting trolleys and stacking shelves. It was really good actually because, for someone who's in finance journalism, I was never that great at maths in high school, but it kind of helped me, get the hang of it when I was working at the register. So those sorts of things were really helpful, I thought. But yeah, it's just kind of about managing your own money. All of a sudden, the idea of you having to, at the time, you're probably earning what, $13, $15
something like that.
If that.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're kind of pausing before spending it.
That's right.
In a way that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise.
And how many burgers have you got to hand out the drive-through window to be able to afford those pair of shoes?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, well, let's dive into some of the issues of the day because this is where I think you're so valuable to our audience, obviously. Beginning with the last financial year and the best performing assets. What really stood out to you in the last financial year?
Yeah, so it stood out to me that it was a good year, despite all of the kind of the chaos, particularly in April when the market really plunged and it got a real fright from Donald Trump. Look, I was interested to see that the ASX gained almost 10%, which is a good return. I mean, people with a superannuation fund are going to be looking at anywhere between 7 and 10% there, which is pretty good depending on their risk profile there. To me, it was the year of CBA. Those shares absolutely surged about 50%, and it's now a $300 billion bank. It's not really the big four anymore. It's the big one and then the rest.
Yeah.
So that was a big one. JB Hi-Fi and Qantas up, closer to 90% is pretty good. Gold was very strong. up.
Still.
Yeah. Yeah. Gold. I mean, that's typically a place where people go when they're a bit nervous. It's a safe haven asset. You know, it's not a yielding asset. It's a buy sell one, but people like it when they're concerned. So that's done really well. And then, of course, property's been a really interesting story over the last financial year. You've seen big returns in places like Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth, pretty good returns in Sydney, and then pretty lousy returns in Melbourne. So that's been interesting too, I think. It's been a pretty good year all told. And then you've got crypto, which is still shooting the lights out.
Yeah, interesting to ask you about that because Bitcoin had a really strong year, didn't it?
Yeah.
What's behind that? What's driving that rise in Bitcoin?
Yeah, certainly. Last financial year, Bitcoin up more than 70%, off already pretty strong levels. So, you know, the thing that all markets do, I think, is price risk. So they're always looking ahead and they're deciding how much risk is there for this asset in the future and what are the pain points and what are the potential boom areas for it. Donald Trump coming in was big for Bitcoin, I reckon. He was seen to be a president who likes that space. He had, you know, talked about favourable policies. And of course, we know Elon Musk was in his corner and very much loves a bit of crypto. So that was big, I think. And look, it's kind of graduated, I think, into this tier where it's being taken seriously by institutional investors and retail investors. You know, it wasn't that long ago, I think about 12 months or so ago, that even AMP bought a little bit of Bitcoin. Not an enormous amount, probably $25, $30 million worth. But I think that's an important nod of approval from AMP, Australia's oldest financial institution. So that's the sort of thing that I think helps when it comes to Bitcoin. You know, people have hung on and they're making money.
Do you see that trend continuing? Because it has historically been considered a volatile asset. Do you see that continuing into the future?
I think it's still a volatile asset and you've got to have nerves of steel if you're going to get into any kind of crypto, even Bitcoin. I think it's here to stay. I should say, cards on the table, I don't invest in crypto, Bitcoin included, which, geez, I wish I had of when I started doing those stories, Sylvia, back in 2009.
Don't we all? Yeah, I know.
The way you kick yourself
I know.
later, if you do the maths, if I had to put $30 in.
Yeah.
Look, I think it's probably going to keep on whipping up and down and having those big days, but, I think there's really no chance of it receding down to any real low tide areas anymore.
You mentioned property. Obviously, interest rates are starting to go down in Australia, but what is that going to do to the property market in terms of prices? Is it going to stimulate the market?
I think it will. I don't think it's going to be like it was during COVID when we saw these huge price growth, auctions that just went nuts. I was covering auctions and I was going to the auctions during COVID where, places were selling for $1 million above the guided range and it was just crazy. The reason I say that is because back then the cash rate came all the way down to 0.1%. And so people were getting long-term fixed rates for below 2%. Now, rates are coming down, but, it's sort of people are going to be paying variable rates in the 5s. So there's still that affordability issue at play. I think we're going to see strong growth, and I spoke to some really good economists in the last week who think double-digit percentage growth is on the cards for most Australian capital cities in the next 12 months. So I think that's probably a fair thing to expect. I don't think we're going to be seeing those massive results just because it's still pretty expensive.
Well, it is. And when you couple, dropping interest rates with what's on offer for first home buyers around the country as well, what do you see being the combined effect of that?
Look, I think there's a bit of a problem with the way that we talk to and about first home buyers with this idea of the property ladder, that we should be, as first home buyers, just getting onto the property market ladder however we can. The idea that anywhere, anyhow, and then it'll increase in capital value and you'll be able to sell it and buy something else and work your way up into that mansion that you've always dreamed of with a portfolio of investment properties. I think that's becoming a really dangerous thing for first home buyers to think, particularly if they're looking in places like Western Sydney and inner Melbourne. Those places have seen units in particular, which is that entry level, lose money for a large portion of the buyers as long as 5, even 10 years ago. That's an incredibly painful thing to reckon with. If you, in good conscience, under good advice, got yourself into a new unit 10 years ago and you're losing money on it now, I mean, that's not a property ladder. That's a bit of a disaster.
Yeah.
So I think there is a caution to be had there that, we are building a lot of new properties in Australia. A lot of them are going to be inner ring units. There's going to be more supply there. Demand is probably going to dwindle in a way that it may not for detached houses. Look, I just think whenever I hear from first home buyers, there's got to be that caution involved. That said, that's not to say don't go and buy a property, because renting is its own issue. That's a problem. You can't maybe have a pet. You can't paint the walls if you wanted to. So it's a powerful thing to own a property. But I just worry a bit about the people who pile in, and then a new building goes up next door and the demand is a bit less than they were hoping. And then they've got to hear from a real estate agent 10 years later saying, you're going to lose $30,000 on this place. It's terrible.
It's terrible. Especially when, as you say, you're all in terms of your assets. So if we go back to then those best performing assets of the last financial year, does that give us any indication of what the next financial year might look like if you're looking into the crystal ball? What can we learn from that about the next year ahead?
That's the thing, isn't it? With those superannuation ads that say past performance is not a good indicator. All this stuff.
All the warnings.
All those little red really, really fast at the end of the ad. I don't know. As for the next financial year, look, it'll probably continue to be growth. Interest rates coming down is going to be supportive of a lot of asset classes, whether it's property. Businesses will get stimulated and potentially grow, and you'll see better profit results there. As for sectors, it's a bit hard to know, but I mean, you'd have to say without a big international shock, without an oil crisis happening in the Middle East, or a war breaking from being a regional to a more localized global one, then you'd expect things to continue to go well, I reckon, across the assets that we've talked about. Look, if there is a bigger geopolitical problem in our future, then gold and Bitcoin will probably do well, as they have in the last 12 months.
How would you describe the Trump effect of the last few months with the tariff war that's been playing out?
Yeah, he scared the bejesus out of everyone in early April. Wall Street tanked. It was fascinating on our market to see trillions of dollars get wiped off globally, and then it just to sort of get pulled back in to the market. I was reading Chanticleer, James Thompson wrote really an interesting column about it. You can't have 10, 15, 20% wiped off a share market and then put back on in 6 weeks without there being something really nasty happening, And I worry a bit about that somebody's going to get hurt.
Something nasty as in something deliberate, something malicious, something...
Not necessarily malicious. I just think there's volatility in there, and that potentially the resilience is maybe a little bit too much. Some of the share valuations that we've had have been tested and they've been, stuck with. We're talking about maybe some of the big tech companies or even some of the big banks in Australia, and they came down, but then they went straight back up. What happens if they get tested again? What happens if CBA does become what the analysts are saying is more fair value? Because CBA is worth 12% of the ASX 200, if it does come back down to fair value, we could lose 5% of the ASX 200's value. So there's a lot of risk around, as there always is. As I said before, it's all about pricing risk, and this is getting done increasingly by computers. You just sort of head further and further down that path, and it makes the big, nasty days even more nasty, I reckon. An old market analyst once said to me, the thing about share markets and really all assets is that they tend to go up the stairs and down the elevator. And so you kind of have these nice long periods of gains, and then you have these elevator days.
Drastic drop.
Yeah. And so, we cover them when they pop up, but I worry a bit that one of those is never too far away.
Maybe we don't have enough resilience to sustain that into the future. Okay, so you mentioned CBA. How is it possible for a bank to be so rich in Australia? What?
Yeah, well, they're pretty big. Yeah. And once you get that big, you sort of get your own gravitational pull, I think. It's the bank that everybody goes to. It's the biggest retail bank. It's increasingly getting into business banking in a way that the other banks are jealous of. And it charges fees. The fees, Sylvia, we never talk enough about the fees. Like if you're taking a mortgage out with CBA or any of the banks, I don't want to pick on them too much. The bank will set the interest rate in a way that'll make them earn money. They're going to have to earn profit on it. They're lending it out to you. in a way that's going to mean that they didn't have to pay as much when they got the money in. But then they charge all these fees too, you know, whether it's $600 just to look at your mortgage application or $400 as an ongoing service fee or $10 to have an offset account. You know, it just adds up to the point where you're paying hundreds of dollars or, you know, in the first instance, a couple of $1,000s to get going. This is the sort of stuff that really helps any bank become massive and keep the gravy train going, you know, those fees.
And when it comes to competition, how does the banking system in this country compare to countries overseas, to other places overseas?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've got 4 big banks, obviously, one a lot bigger than the others.
Yeah.
Other countries, it's pretty concentrated as well. We're lucky in Australia, actually, in some ways, because we have almost 100 ADIs, that's authorised deposit-taking institutions, which means that we have a lot of banks out there. We just don't use them. You know, they don't have the advertising and marketing budgets of the big ones. They don't get in front of us enough. Some of them have really good interest rates and really good reasons to bank with them, but we tend not to give them that much oxygen. And so we do have some choice in Australia, which is a good thing. And I'd encourage people, if they're thinking about making a big financial decision, even just opening a savings account, to really have a look out there as to what a much, much smaller bank might be able to provide for you. You're not going to lose your money. In Australia, if you've got anything under $250,000 in a bank account, you can't lose it. It's not going anywhere. So you really should just be looking at what your interest rate is going to be and what sort of service they're providing you.
Always shopping around, right?
Yeah,
That's the
totally.
key to it. Well, we talk a lot on the Payoff podcast, of course, about the generational wealth gap and how younger generations are facing really unique hurdles to long-term financial security. Property obviously plays a lot into that. How do you see that as an issue? Where do you stand on it? Do you think that it truly is harder for a young person today, a 20 or a 30-year-old, to set themselves up for the future than it was perhaps for their parents?
Absolutely. I think there's no doubt about it. I think this generation or the younger generation coming through has got it harder. And I think part of the problem with where this conversation kind of started probably 10 years ago was that there was a lot of blame being put on younger people that they were living wrong.
Frivolous.
Yeah, that they were doing the wrong stuff with their money and they were being silly. And I'm glad to see a lot of that being sucked out of the conversation and it kind of being had in a more logical, sort of thoughtful way. You know, you go out and you talk to older Australians and they are just as concerned now that their kids will never be able to afford a property and, you know, what are they going to be like? Look, I think it's definitely harder, and I think the problem with it now is that it's all being pointed in the direction of, and I hate to say this because it sounds so callous, it's being pointed in the direction of your parents dying. I mean, that's awful, but that's when the payday happens for...
Inheritance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, this is the thing, you know, you've got this kind of system now where a lot of older Australians have saved well. They might have had superannuation, which came in the early 90s, and so they've gotten at least some of the benefit of that. And they've been sitting on a property at least, which when they sell is capital gains tax exempt. So there's a lot of money going around when somebody passes away and it goes to their kids. So all of a sudden, that's the moment. That's the moment where, you know, perhaps you're paying off your mortgage or your life gets easier or you're out of debt in other ways. And I think that's the problem with this generational conversation now is that it's just this awful waiting game where you don't want your parents to pass away. But unfortunately, when they do, the inheritance conversation is so much louder than it was in previous generations.
Yeah, so talk us through the discussion around an inheritance tax and where we're at in this country with that.
We are at precisely nowhere with that conversation. You know, in the lead up to the last election, there was a lot of questions asked of Jim Chalmers. Hey, would you ever consider an inheritance tax or a death duty as they have elsewhere? Because Australia is rare, relatively rare, in that a lot of OECD countries have it. We don't, and it is political suicide to go anywhere near it. In the same way that you know, if you talk about franking credits or if you talk about negative gearing, you're in big trouble. So they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to do anything about it. The reality, of course, is that if you did, your budget would start to look a bit healthier, and you might need to ask so much of the younger people in terms of income taxes. Maybe even stamp duty is a state tax, but that hurts younger people disproportionately. So I think it is at least a conversation. I don't expect it'll ever get up. Certainly not anytime soon.
How does it work overseas? What does it look like?
Look, it's just a proportion of the inheritance over a certain threshold.
Yeah.
So if we're talking in the UK, up to a certain amount of money is okay. You can just pass that straight through. But if you're talking millions of dollars getting passed from one generation to the other, there is a percentage tax on that. And of course, lawyers, accountants get involved. There's a million different ways that people dodge these things, but at least to have a system in place, a lot of other countries do and earn money off it. And there's sort of at least some clipping of the ticket on the way through, if I could put it that way.
Everyone's clipping a ticket these days, aren't they?
Aren't they just?
Get off our tickets. What about, the federal government is pushing ahead with its contentious tax on superannuation balances above $3 million.
Yep.
How do you see that changing the superannuation landscape?
Yeah, well, the big problem with that one is that they're not indexing it, which means that $3 million now and $3 million in a few years' time, it's a different thing. So, look, I think that's going to end up happening. I think they will probably have to have some, response to the pressure and index that. But, look, superannuation's a funny one. It is first and foremost a tax structure. And I think that that's going to get a little less great for people who want to store big amounts of money in there. Is it going to change the situation entirely and make people put their money in all weird and wacky different types of places? Probably not. I think it's been thought through enough that, superannuation being, I think it's $4 trillion worth now. I don't think that that's going to come apart at the seams anytime soon. But look, I was very interested to see that there was $3 million, which is perhaps not an amount of money that everyday Australians are dealing with, but in the future it will be, I think. So, I was surprised a bit at how it was presented. Is it going to be changed? Maybe indexed, but that's probably it.
Yeah. So, are you getting DMs all the time, people asking you to hit certain topics on your TikTok videos?
Sometimes. How
to cover this issue, we want to know more about that. What kind of things do people want to know about? What are the big issues that are on the minds of particularly young Australians?
Yeah, it's a good question because, people do get in touch and they've got gripes about certain issues that they want sort of aired and talked about, and I totally get that. And I really like it when people kind of get in touch and talk about it. Look, it's kind of hugging the types of stuff that I'm doing, I think. They just want a little bit more of it and maybe a little bit more pointed. Insurance is a big one. People are really struggling with that. People don't like market concentration. They seem to want more options, and I think that's absolutely valid.
Is that a much bigger issue in Australia than it is elsewhere?
Yeah, it is a bit. The problem is that they're getting really big and powerful, and they're able to use their market power in a way to maybe not stop competition, but certainly raise the hurdle you need to clear. If you wanted to be a big supermarket or a big bank or an airline, it's very expensive to do so. I think the thing is Australia was a pretty small country population-wise, and now it's it's still small globally, but it's getting up there. It's continuing to climb, and so if you've just got two big supermarkets, look, the ACCC investigation showed us that that's not really working out well enough. They're too cozy, as they said, as the ACCC said. So, I think it is a bit of a problem, and I think we really need to see some more attention in how we're going to tackle that from a policy level. What we really need to see, if we're talking about supermarkets, is another Aldi come in. Aldi's, of course, an international player. Australians love Aldi. They really like it a lot, according to all of the trust data.
We love the special buys.
We love all that stuff. Yeah. So what we really need to see is another one of those come in and get 9, 10, 11% of the market share slowly and gradually as Aldi did. I've got this theory about the I'm off on a tangent now, but I've got this theory about Coles and Woolworths. The problem is that they're not really trying to be significantly cheaper than one another. They're trying to be better than one another, which is fine, but it means they're adding more and more cost. Like if you want to bring people into your Coles as opposed to the Woolies across the road, all of a sudden you've got to have on-site bakery, you've got to have a really good deli, you've got to have a really slick operation going in there, something that looks good. You might want to have a juice bar or even some sushi rolls that are getting rolled in front of you. The problem is that adds cost. You have to pass that on to the consumer one way or another. And Aldi, it's bare bones. Yeah. And that is why it's cheaper. So that's why, you have two locked in competition. They're kind of matching each other every step of the way. And then you have someone over here all of a sudden providing a genuine alternative.
Keeping it simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Australia has one of the highest household debt to income ratios in the world. How much of a concern is that? And do you see that shifting?
It's a massive concern. I think it is the starting point for every conversation we have about economics in Australia is how in debt we are. Average new mortgage in Australia nationally is upwards of $660,000. I mean, that is enormous. If I do a social media post where I reference something like that, you get all these people in the US and UK going, what? That's so much. And it is, especially when you're paying 5.5% or 6% on it. I mean, it kind of changes everything about what we need to be paid from our employer, what our employer then needs to charge us to justify the salaries that it's paying its staff. I mean, it's massive, and it's fundamental to Australian psyche and economy that this is how we're set up, is that this is the wealth-making machine in property. But the barrier for entry is now so high that the amount of debt that you need to take on is so enormous that you need parental help, you need to wait for the insurance, all these sorts of things that you never had to before. So going back to that question of intergenerational wealth, I mean, it's all built around property. It's all built around debt, which goes back to the other question of how the banks are making so much money.
It's all
it's
one
connected.
big circle, isn't it? One big cycle. How much of that is just the psychology in Australia of the great Australian dream of owning a home?
Yep.
How much of that is still a part of that cycle?
It's enormous. I think it was Robert Menzies who said that the dream is to own a patch of land that you can put a fence around. And I think that is so at the core of us as Australians, maybe more than other countries. I don't know. I've never lived abroad for any meaningful amount of time, but it's certainly the way we feel here is that is how I've made it. I've got my home and nobody can tell me anything. This is my place. And so it's really sad in many ways to see that kind of chiseled away for younger people. And it's a burden that they carry with them, and that kind of concern of, am I going to be able to achieve this thing? It's getting further away. It's getting harder. So that, I think, is really at the core because it's done such a good job of earning people money over their life. That we've encouraged investing in it, and we've set up tax, settings that are encouraging that as well. So, I mean, look, it's probably done too good of a job, I guess. With
the lack of supply, that's obviously a big part of the housing crisis that exists in Australia today. There's this discussion that keeps bubbling up in the media about boomers, in inverted commas, failing to downsize and create space for young families who need that space. Where do you stand on that issue? Because, of course, on one side, it would be great to create more space for younger generations who need the 3 bedrooms for children. But on the flip side, people have worked really hard to build up what is a part of their future nest egg as well. Yeah. And there's also an element of comfort and security that comes with being in the home that you raised your family in and built up around you over decades.
Totally. That's a really massive one. I did a video on that not that long ago where I used an AI filter to make myself look older. But the thing I was talking about in the video, and I think the thing I believe, is that you can't expect anyone of any generation to do something against what they're incentivized to do. And there's really no incentive for anyone to downsize. I mean, why would you? You're freeing up the money, you're taking it out of the capital gains tax-free environment, and then you're figuring out what to do with it next. And, is that beneficial? Not really. You're not really getting much out of that transaction. The house may not be perfect for you anymore. You may not need 5 bedrooms. But if you're asking an older person to sell and move from a house that they love just so that a younger person can get in and do it because it's the right thing to do, well, that's madness. They're not going to do that.
How could you incentivize that?
Look, there's the stick or the carrot. Do you say, we'll give you an incentive to sell that property and move into somewhere more size appropriate, or do you say we're going to make it so that it's more expensive to do that? Land taxes and other kinds of taxes. I think probably the carrot will be better, but that costs money. The stick will get you voted out of Parliament. So what do you do?
So good luck, politicians in Australia.
I know, that's miserable. But that's my thing. Is Charlie Munger, who was Warren Buffett's right-hand man until he passed away, R.I.P., one of the best. He said, "Show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome." And it's one of the best quotes in all of economics. because really that's all that matters. It doesn't matter what's the right thing to do or what's going to help the younger generation. It doesn't matter. All you're thinking about is what I'm going to do for me and my family. And if it means staying in the big home, you're just going to do it.
Now, on a more personal level, you're now a father of 2.
Yes.
Congratulations on
you.
number 2. I don't think I've seen you since you've had number 2. Or maybe not in person anyway. I think anyone can probably think they're pretty good with money up until they experience the pester power of a 4-year-old. So how has having children tested you and your own relationship with money?
Yeah, it's changed what I thought I was going to be like, for sure. All too often, I'm caving to the demand of just one more Matchbox car. You know what I mean?
The Kinder Surprise. That's what gets me every time I go to the supermarket.
You're kind of like, oh, I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
But then you're like,
I wouldn't be this guy.
I know. And then path of least resistance, all of a sudden you are that guy.
Yeah.
No, it's been absolutely wonderful. I just love being a dad. And I really hope to instill on them the long-term nature of money. I don't know exactly how to do that. I'm watching all the YouTube videos and listening to the podcasts about how to sort of figure that out and instill the right lessons. But if I can get one thing across to these kids, it's that start young and don't be, overly reckless. Just put a little bit of money away whenever you can. You'll thank yourself for it later. I really hope I'm going to be able to do that. I mean, my kids are 4 and 6 months, so those conversations.
You got a bit of time to figure this stuff out.
Yeah. Right now, it'd just be great if they go to bed and stay in bed.
That's
at
helpful. Yeah. It's good to set low expectations.
Yeah, pretty much.
Definitely. So, I guess big picture, what would be your message to a young person today who has concerns about their future and how they're going to set themselves up for the long term?
It would probably be to get independent advice for their situation. I would never want to point someone in the direction of broad brush stuff that may not be quite right for them. So I would say there are lots of good advisors out there who will be certainly free at a kind of a consultation level, an initial consultation level. I think seriously question the general advice that getting onto the property ladder is the best and only thing you can do for yourself, particularly if you're talking about getting into a new build apartment. Question it hard. Don't not do it, but really figure it out. And then I think invest however you can. I mean, times are tough. A lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. I also don't want to say, hey, just put aside $200 a week, you'll be fine. But if you can put aside a few bucks every week, it'll build. Compound interest is one of the great wonders of the world. Invest in things like ETFs. They're great. It's taking a lot of the risk out of it. You can buy a big bucket of shares in one go. Think long term. Think about your superannuation when you're young. If you're in super, make sure you're in a growth portfolio. Take a bit of interest, look into it, check in on the app every so often. And one of the big things is maybe don't do Uber Eats. You know what I mean?
Oh, no. La, 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 la.
I know. I don't want to be that guy, but
No, I get it.
Uber Eats kills me a bit because, look, maybe we don't have to say Uber Eats. Maybe we say food delivery services. I mean, if you're going down, and I've done some numbers on this, if you're going down, if you call the restaurant, go down and pick it up versus getting it through one of those apps, you might be spending 45% more. God, that's a lot. Yeah. If you're doing it once a week, that's actually a noticeable amount of money. The restaurants don't love it. I'm not sure the delivery riders love it. It's a lot of money, and it's more money than we realise. And I just think, ooh.
Yikes.
Sometimes you have to. If you're at home with your kids, you can't go out.
It's the price of laziness.
I know,
isn't it?
And it's convenient. I get it, but my goodness, like, if I could get rid of it altogether and just say, hey, everybody, we're going back to the old days, I would do that.
See, you're making me feel better about the pizza oven that I bought Pete for his birthday a couple of years ago so we could make the pizzas ourselves.
All of a sudden, you're making money.
Cost per use.
All of a sudden,
we're just making it rain.
I bet the pizzas are good though, right?
They're really good.
They are.
He's a very good cook.
Yep.
I'm a lucky one.
Very good.
You have an interest rate decision to go and cover, so we've got to let you go. Thank you for being so generous with your time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Sylvia.
Our pleasure. Anytime.